It is kind of cool though. We each have our own like color palette behind us. You could almost, somebody would be like, they're not in the same room. It's split screen.
Should edit, like, make it weird to cross that line.
And we like, and then edit.
Oh, thank you.
What's going on, everybody? This is Chip Walton and
William Richards.
And we are in one of Northern Brewers' many illustrious conference rooms to sample a couple of beers. These two beers were brewed as part of a forthcoming Northern Brewer University online course that is basically an intro to brew in a bag. For the demonstrations in that video class, I brewed two beers, one full size in my garage, one small batch on my kitchen stovetop, fermented both of them at home, also threw a couple of curveballs at them during fermentation. So William and I are going to taste and get real nerdy on a Dead Ringer IPA fermented with lager yeast at, or actually a little bit above, the upper end of its recommended temperature range, as well as an Imperial Kitchen Sink Saison fermented in the garage on a couple of warm days. Before we go bottoms up here and share our thoughts, if you dig this new generation of Northern Brewer videos where we introduce new beer kits, walk through new equipment, or just geek out on what we're brewing at home, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell, maybe share it with a buddy, much like I'm sharing this beer with William. So the first brew up on our left, cheers. This is the extremely popular Dead Ringer IPA kit, beer kit from Northern Brewer.
Yeah, continues to be one of our top sellers all the time.
Fermented, the twist is it's fermented with a lager yeast strain above pretty much the recommended temperature range. So maybe like a Dead Ringer IPL-ish.
All right, if you say so.
Quick look at the brew day. It's a 5-gallon brew in a bag in the garage using the locking pulley system, which I absolutely love. The grist, simple, 11 pounds raw two-row, 1 pound Breeze C40, 4 ounces total of Centennial hops, 1 ounce at 60, 1 ounce at 20, 2 at 5, 1 in dry hop. The only freestyle on the front end of the brew is I dry hopped with Amarillo in hopes of ramping up that orangey, orange peel vibe I often get from that hop. And as a beer kit, Dead Ringer is usually fermented with a clean Chico-style American ale yeast strain. But as we've been talking so much about cold IPA here at headquarters as of late, I was eager to use a lager yeast fermented warm to see what happens. So what I chose was the Imperial Pilgrimage L26. It was a limited edition strain. 44 to 56 is the suggested range. The talking points for that is a clean fermentation balanced with a accentuated malt profile for a balanced beer, which doesn't sound unlike a Chico strain anyway, right?
Yep, for sure.
Since our groundwater was already warming up about a month ago, it was tough to get the beer chilled to the upper 50s where I would have liked to have started. I got it chilled to the mid 60s, pitched the yeast, oxygenated, and I put the fermenter bucket in a large tub of cold mid 40s ice water with a towel and a floor fan, you know, the classic old school swamp cooler trick. Lo-fi, no-buy is what I like to say. After everything equalized, I was able to keep the water in the tub at around 58 to 62 for the better part of a week. Fermentation took a day or so to start, but once it got going, it was very happy. So what we ended up with here was a 1060 OG, 1009 FG, about 6.7%, brewed over a month ago, kegged, and been chilling in the brew cave ever since. So I'm going to kind of consider that a little lager, basically 3 weeks of lagering.
I'd call that lager.
And all to see if we get any noticeable difference. I think we both know this beer pretty well as a kit. What do you think of it having that lager strain pushed pretty high?
It's clean. I would say it's really clean for a lager at that temperature. I was surprised.
What do you think most people hearing lager yeast pushed high think would happen? And the same kind of goes in the conversation when we've been talking about cold IPAs. Like, what is the myth that you think people are going to go for?
I would bet fruity, a lot of fruity esters. I think fruity, to me, that's what I would expect more than anything. Maybe some other just kind of weird off characteristics from it, but really just fruity yeast esters more than anything.
Yeah, and this beer is showing pretty much none of that.
No, it's definitely hops and malt. It's actually, the hops come through the most. I'm definitely getting that increased orange characteristic too, I think. Just citrus and orange.
A little bit of pine,
Yep.
but big orange peel, tangerine. I was just a few points off the original Gravity 1060, the Kit's 1064. Guess me and Abby didn't squeeze that bag quite well enough. But I think that kind of shows slightly in that the bitterness factor is just a little bit higher. I feel like a Dead Ringer doesn't kind of linger bitter quite as long. It kind of goes into the flavor hops. We've been hearing more and more lately that people are pushing these lager strains, especially something like 3470, way up. And I agree. You'd think it would be fruity. I think maybe what's going on that people don't realize is like the fermentation of a lager and the conditioning of a lager are actually two kind of different things. And I think a lot of the subduing of things is actually happening in the conditioning phase, maybe?
Sure. I'd agree with that, and I bet you yeast companies have come a long way too. I bet you that's one of those older stereotypes that have been around since before liquid yeast was really huge. Especially the pitch rate, you have Imperial, so that's a nice big pitch rate in there too. So
I don't know that I would recommend this over a clean ale yeast strain. I feel like it pretty much did the exact same thing. It's just cool to see the numbers in action.
Actually,
yeah.
I was gonna say I actually like it better than the base kit. So I don't know. I think ale yeast does give you some esters, and I think you're getting more of the true hop characteristic almost through this.
Okay.
I'm really just liking that orange character in here right now too, so
Yeah.
that's really nice. But like you said, we've been having more and more IPAs with lager yeast, and for me, I think part of it is you're getting less of that ester character from the yeast, and you're just getting a cleaner hop characteristic.
That's the whole point of a cold IPA, right?
Yeah.
You're pushing that ale yeast cold, so it's giving no fruitiness.
Yep.
Lager strained hot, which none of us maybe knew except for like the American Society of Brewing Chemists, but in
Real
all
smart people.
in all of our faces. So that's the only thing I had to talk about there. Brew number 2 is what I'm calling an Imperial Kitchen Sink Saison. I put this together for a small batch brew in a bag demo on the stovetop from odds and ends left over in the basement. For 2.75 gallons of beer, the grist is 5.5 pounds Pils malt, nice clean base malt, 1/4 pound of Victory for just a little bit of toast, 1/8 pound of acidulated to help with mash pH because I don't mess with that too much, bittering charge of 1/2 ounce German Tradition, and a 5-minute flavor addition of 1 ounce Nobility hop blend from BSG. I've had a few beers with Nobility hop. I think it has a really big pop of lemon peel, lemongrass that I thought would be nice in a Saison. Brewed to spec, the beer had an OG of 12 bricks, which I nailed perfectly, but for the sake of showing class students what adding a little bit of DME can do if you need to bump up your gravity on a brew in a bag brew day, I added 1 pound of Pils DME. Might have been more than example needed to show just a little. Either way, it brought it up to 16 bricks, 1064. For the yeast, I chose Imperial Yeast B64 Napoleon French Saison with a temperature range of 65 to 78. I had really hoped to actually push this beyond the upper limit in my garage over a couple of hot days when it was in the upper 80s outside, but I was shocked to find the temperature never really got above mid-70s. I pitched half a pouch. Fermentation was extremely vigorous. As you can see in this video, almost looked like a lava lamp like fermentation, big old globs of chunky yeast floating around the fermenter. It was quite mesmerizing and actually a lot of fun after not having had anything in glass in quite a while. Went from 1064 down to 1005, no slouch, weighing in here at almost 8%, 7.8% ABV. Fermented out in about 4 days. I let it rest and condition in the cooler basement for another week and then kegged it. So here we are.
Cheers again.
Yeah. You're a Saison man. So that's why, and you were the one that was like, put it in the garage.
Yeah, I was excited for this one. I'm always looking forward to having another Saison from somebody. So,
what about a higher temp? So I didn't even get the temp I wanted, but say if I had gotten into 80, 82 for those couple of days of initial fermentation, do you think this would be something even?
It'd be a little different maybe, but in my opinion, the key with that higher fermentation is you still start off at a lower fermentation for that first day or so. That's when a lot of the yeast characteristics are produced, is in that first couple of days of fermentation. That ramping temperature, that higher temperature, just helps a lot of the different Saison yeast finish out because they're notorious for stalling out.
Yeah.
So definitely higher temps, but don't start at higher temps.
I gotcha.
I've had a few different, we have quite a few different active brew clubs around here, and I've had a few different tastings of them where they pitch 68, 72, 76, all the way up to like 94. And when you pitch it that high 80s, 90s, it's super phenolic, and you actually get like a bitterness from the phenols that the yeast produce, and it can be pretty off-putting.
Okay.
Definitely more bubblegum, which some people like, but you definitely start seeing more of that bubblegum banana character for sure.
Whereas this one, do you like my beer, William?
Yeah, I like the, it's got like a lemon, lime pith, peel type of character, which is pretty normal across the board for Saisons. I like that characteristic.
I feel like even at 10:05, it's not quite as dry as I want the sensation. Granted, this was at home in the keg. I think it has a little more sparkle. It went into a Grolsch bottle and then here.
Yeah.
I also wondered to myself if it was that pound of DME that's kind of just doing the residual thing a little bit. But
yeah, it does seem sweeter, I think, for a 10:05 beer for sure. That also could just be some alcohol sweetness, I suppose, playing in there too.
True.
Maybe
an Imperial Saison.
Yeah. Maybe just a little bit more bitterness too to help with that. I think a lot of Saisons should be more bitter than what people realize. It's actually a pretty bitter style.
Yeah, when we were, what were we talking about? I can't remember, we were talking about a couple of weeks ago when I was looking it up. I was like, oh, they are actually, can be really intensely bitter. And I wonder if they just don't come off as that bitter because the spice, the phenolics are working all these other things in, right? You're not like drinking this bone dry, bitter bone.
Yeah, and a lot of them are bottle conditions, easier to get a little bit higher carbonation. I think that helps play with the balance in your head too, with that more carbonation in your tongue. Just kind of dancing around in there. And you still have some of that grainy quality too. Like, I like that the grain shows through. Sometimes Saisons, people push too much phenolics and you lose the grain characteristic.
I'm going to top off real quick with some Dead Ringer IPL, wannabe IPL.
Is this the proper serving vessel?
Yeah, that's what we do, man. We grab big glasses and turn them into pitchers in the conference room. Yeah, I want to thank William for hanging out, having a few beers. Check out the Dead Ringer kit, obviously. I will, if you don't want to rewind it and write down the recipe for the Saison, and I guess I could write that up probably in the video description. We got a Brew in a Bag class coming out on Northern Brewer University very soon. So look for that if that's something you're interested in, or if you know somebody who's an extract brewer that you'd like to gently move into all grain, or if you're just an all grain brewer that's like, I just want to make it a lot easier today. Check that out. Anything else, Mr. William?
I just want to say that DME trick is actually handy for any style of brewing. I always make sure to have some Pils DME on hand in case something goes wrong and I want to hit my gravity. That's a pro tip, I guess. I don't know.
Always have dry malt extract because it's just easier to measure, right? Like you
Yeah.
can say either or, but it's like, do you really want to be like futzing with a tablespoon?
No, I don't futz with anything on brew day.
The string of extract that you can't get to break, and now it's like burning on the side of your kettle. All right, y'all. Till next time.
Peace.
I did that once on Brewing TV where Dawson sat at his own table. It was Dawson and Evil Dawson. And he sat at his own dining room table. And he had half the conversation this way and half the conversation this way. And it, for the most part, worked, but there was slight, like you could tell, like the sun was like changing slightly, or like it worked enough to where people just like appreciated the effort though. They're like, what are these guys doing?